Promised Land episode 3 is here, and as you can see, Moses has returned. Now, in this episode, we see the return of Moses and the continuation of the struggles of the nation of Israel. They did move around some of the timelines going into this episode in particular, but I do think overall this is a much better episode than we saw in episode 2. Now, episode 1, I would probably rate it around a 7.5, maybe an 8 out of 10. Episode 2, I would go down a little bit and be closer to a 7 out of 10. And then episode 3, well, you're just gonna have to find out my proper rating at the end of this video, but overall, I'd say it is much better. There's a lot of things that work a lot better within this episode, while still having some of the small bumps that maybe are just things that we're going to see within this first season. And so we'll talk about it as we go through. Now, this is just a review of the episode. I'm not really going to get into a ton of spoilers or talking about every little bit of this episode. We're going to save that for the deep dives as we go through each episode and each piece of what I want to talk about within this season as a whole. But getting into episode 3 really gives us a large idea of what this series as a whole is going to look like, because this means that we're basically halfway through the first season. Remember, there's only 6 episodes in this first season. So let's go back to the beginning of this episode and let's look at this, just the opener here so I can show you this. And again, we're not going to get into a ton of spoilers or exactly what's happening in this episode throughout, but I did want to show you the intro of this as we're picking up off of episode 2.
Moses, you've returned.
Some of the people in the camp, not me, were very concerned that Moses was going to die upon that mountain. Again, not me. He survived, obviously, and then he took Aaron up there with him.
So, how soon before I take my sandals off?
Right now, actually.
All right, so a lot of little biblical things here. Of course, we'll get into all that in the deep dives, but I really love how they're kind of moving things around and showing us a lot of what's going on here during this time. Number one, they're starting kind of in Exodus chapters 19 to 24-ish. And so there's a bunch of stuff that happens within those chapters where God gives Moses commands to bring Aaron up and take his sandals off, and then to bring some of the elders up, and all this different stuff happens, right? So some of it's like really crazy, and we'll get into that when we really deep dive into the scripture of it all. But you see here, Aaron in the past episode, in episode 2, was really struggling with his leadership and not knowing how to do these things, right? Miriam kind of similarly with the women. And then you see Korah and Chasisi having, this group of men that Korah's leading, and him doing all that kind of stuff as well. We see the continuation of some of those things, but primarily we're focused on Moses being on Mount Sinai and communing with God. And so he does this not only here when he comes back down and brings Aaron up and then brings the elders up, but also throughout the majority of this episode, he's kind of gone, right? Well, what happens when Moses is gone for a long period of time? Not only do we see the leadership struggles that we saw in the previous episode when Moses was kind of on his day off, but now we're seeing it even more so with Aaron, particularly where he's trying to figure out, okay, how do I lead here when Moses is just not here at all? I can't even go over to him to ask him questions or to lean on him for certain things. Everything's kind of getting out of control. And while he thought it was going to be 2 or 3 days, now it's 10 days, now it's 20 days, now it's 30 days, now it's 40 days, right, that Moses is gone. And that's a long time. It's a long time for Aaron to be in charge and to figure out what he is supposed to be doing. And because of that, well, there's a lot of stuff that happens there. And if you've read the scriptures, you know exactly what's coming. But these things kind of get moved around quite a lot. Instead of having just that moment from chapters kind of 19 to 24-ish, we're getting all the way to chapter 32. And so there's a lot of things within the timeline that are moving around here. Now, just like with The Chosen, we're seeing very similar things. Just like with House of David, we're seeing very similar things because they want the storyline to fit what they want here. Now, with this show in particular, I'm giving a little bit more leeway because, well, it's a satire, right? And I get that they're not going to be the most historically accurate show out of everybody, right? I totally understand that. And so I do get why they're moving things around, but as always on my scale of things, that has to take off some sort of points, right? I want a biblical show to be as accurate as possible. But let's talk about the great things within this episode. First off, I think the dialogue worked a lot better in this episode than it did in episode 2. There wasn't as many kind of missed jokes or like things that felt just awkward and not like they should have been there. A lot of the things landed a lot better than they did in episode 2. Also, I think the storylines just fit better in terms of like where they were going. I think there was less storylines, and so it wasn't as complicated to move through the episode because Moses was gone the whole time. Essentially, it means that they were just focused on Aaron, Miriam, and then Korah and Chasisi. And so those felt a little bit better, and Joshua didn't have as much of his own storyline there either to break into the episode. So it felt a little less complicated, a little more simple, and a little bit more focused on the main set of characters in the storyline that are kind of, running through this episode. That being said, Aaron, of course, is focusing on his leadership. Miriam is focusing on a women's tent for them to meet, which kind of wraps in Korah and Chasisi as well. We also get 2 new characters, the makers of the tent. And if you know who the makers of the tent are in scripture, well, they're going to fit here and of course have a main role that comes later on in the season as well, which is really cool to see. I'm glad that they're introducing these characters in a way that is natural to the show overall. Also, I will say the character that was introduced in episode 2, which is Caleb, he of course is going to be a massive piece of the future of this series, and I really like his involvement. The one big complaint that I had for episode 2 was kind of the factor of them not having a Jim, so to speak. And what I mean by this is if you watch The Office, Jim and Pam are kind of the only 2 normal characters within the show, right? They have their quirky moments, but 90% of the time, they're just normal human beings who are kind of interacting with these weirdos most of the time, right? The Promised Land, I think, is missing some of those characters. In this episode, we see Caleb acts a little bit more like that normal character. He's not 90% wacky, kind of like the rest of the characters are. Now, I love that wackiness. I think it really works well, but for the characters to have normal emotions and normal kind of states of being, I think you need some sort of measuring tape, if that makes sense. And having a normal person as that measuring tape really helps to understand what's going on here. And Caleb, I think, could be that person for this series overall. Now, I love this stuff, of course, with Korah and Chasisi. It kind of continues on here into episode 3. And then Miriam has some really good moments with Zipporah, within this episode as well, where her and the women are trying to make their own women's meeting tent so they can have their own place to meet whenever they want. They don't have to just have a women's hour in the men's tent like they were doing before. And so, yeah, really good stuff here. I won't spoil the ending of this episode. I will say, though, as I kind of wrap up this review, overall, the episode was amazing. The ending of this episode is probably a 10 out of 10. I mean, it is really a solid ending to this, but it does bring up a point to me, which is that, yes, the ending of this episode is pretty serious. In fact, it's very serious. And so much so that it reminds me of the pattern that we've seen pretty much throughout all the 3 episodes that we've gotten so far. The pattern that I'm seeing is in these episodes, we're kind of getting like really, really funny. Okay, storyline, funny, storyline. And then the ending is always very serious. And it kind of has this lesson to be taught. Now, is every single episode going to have that same feel throughout the entire series? Or are they going to change that up and mix that up every once in a while? For example, in The Office, there are some episodes, of course, that end very seriously, but there are levels to that, right? It's a different roller coaster that fits at different times. So in The Office or Parks and Rec, which is the most the closest shows to what we're seeing here, right? You kind of get these ups and downs of different moments within the show where there's a seriousness and then there's a levity, right? And so within the show, I love that there is that serious piece, but is every single episode gonna follow the exact same track so that it's really predictable? I hope not. I hope in the rest of the season we see some variation of that, where there's some more serious points in the beginning or the middle, and then there's like a funny or a levity that comes near the end of the episode as well, and kind of fills it up there. And so, yeah, loved a lot of these moments here. Of course, you know that we love a lot of the actors that are in this show. Wasim is one of my favorite people to talk to when we go to Chosen events. Of course, we know Shireen Khan, who plays Herodias in The Chosen. There's a bunch of people in here. Brad, Dav, all these guys are really, really amazing. Artun, who plays Joshua. Really, a lot of these people are just amazing. We've seen them before. We've seen them in The Chosen. We've seen them as extras in The Chosen or background in The Chosen. And they've done a really, really great job, right? Even people in our community that are part of this show. But I will say the episode 3 really knocks it out of the park for the most part. So overall, all that to say, I would probably rate this episode, I think, conservatively an 8 out of 10. Now, my ranking system is pretty difficult, right? A 10 out of 10 is essentially impossible on my ranking system. You would have to blow me out of the water without any complaints about anything for me to give you a 10 out of 10. Now, the biblical accuracy in here definitely brings it down a little bit. Even though it's a satire, I totally understand that they probably shouldn't be ranked with the same measuring stick, and that's probably true here. However, there is some inaccuracies there in terms of kind of where things happen or when things happen or in what order they happen. But as we get to that point, there's some grace that can happen there as well. So I will say I'll take it down a point for that, and then also I'll say there are just some things that I would like to see some variation in throughout, but an 8 out of 10 is still really, really, really solid. That could come up maybe half a point if I was being a little bit less conservative there in terms of the rating. So yeah, let me know your thoughts about episode 3 of The Promised Land. I thought it was really, really well done. I'm looking forward to the future of the rest of the episodes, the 3 episodes that are left here, and I'm really excited to see where this goes from here. I know some of it because I was on set with them, but I'm looking forward to the future of this series and to see what happens from there. A little bit of a news update. Of course, they've shot season 1, but I believe they are going to, if not already currently shooting season 2, which should be quite interesting. Of course, I don't think they've made that announcement or anything, but of course my eyes have been peeled for the last couple of years on this show, and so I've got some stuff we'll talk about soon. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears ready, as always in the Sleuth family. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.